Hello everybody, my name is Stratnos, and welcome to my spec spotlight for the Demonology Warlock. This is the series where we talk about Mythic Plus specs and what to expect when you have one in your group. We'll talk about their strengths and their weaknesses and all of their major abilities. And we'll cover what to expect if you're playing with one, or if you're thinking about rolling up a character and playing it into Mythic Plus. So let's get started by talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the Demonology Warlock. The biggest strength of the Demonology Warlock is just their damage. Their damage is pretty good, especially on single target and cleave. Their sustained damage is pretty good, and unlike other Warlock specs, they can actually do some of a Mythic Plus damage profile. Their damage isn't too reliant on, they don't have a big 3-minute cooldown they're always waiting for like the other Warlock specs are, so their damage is good every 90 seconds instead, and they can do pretty good burst AoE by comparison to the other Warlock specs. A drawback is that their damage is still pretty rampy compared to all of the non-Warlock specs, and it still cares about their cooldown, so it's halfway between, I'd say, the specs with good Mythic Plus damage profiles and the other Warlock specs. It's a nice mid-ground there, but still overall a drawback compared to most of the other specs. Another drawback of the Demonology Warlock is that choosing to interrupt costs damage. Their interrupt comes with a Fellhunter pet, so in order to have their Fellhunter pet out, they have to not have their Felguard pet out, and especially in AoE, that Felguard's Bladestorm thing does a lot of damage, and so making that choice costs them damage, and that is a big drawback. Okay, let's move on to the key abilities of the Demonology Warlock. Once every 90 seconds, they have a Demonic Tyrant, although it's less than 90 seconds, and can be more often than once per that time window, depending on which essences they choose to use. That is a big damage cooldown for them, though. It keeps the rest of their pets out for longer and does a bunch of dam. So a big window where Demonology Warlocks will do good damage is when their Demonic Tyrant is out. They can also Soulstone people, which can be used as a battle res, which is nice, but it can also be used as a preemptive battle res. So Demonology can help facilitate death skips in a pretty reliable way. Sometimes you're in this spot where you're trying to skip somewhere and you need to have somebody die and then get a B-res cast on them quickly while 30 mobs are killing your whole group very fast. That can be very sketchy. Warlocks can soulstone somebody, they can soulstone the healer and then you can run through, and as long as the healer makes it to somewhere good to die in, that's all you need to do. You don't actually need to worry about getting a cast off after the fact, after you get there. So that can be nice, but in general, soulstone is mostly used reactively rather than proactively. Warlocks can also create health stones. Now, when we're talking about Warlock utility, people often mention health stones to me. One thing that's important to note is that you can get a stack of health stones without actually having a Warlock in your group by just having somebody hop on their Warlock alt and make health stones outside the dungeon, and then your whole group can come in with 3 charges of health stone. So if you're doing that, which most groups in high keys do, then adding a Warlock to your group doesn't actually bring those first 3 charges of health stones. The best 3 health stones in a dungeon, in terms of where they'll save your life or where you'll use those first 3 health stone charges, are not Warlock utility. Any group can have those without a Warlock. It's only health stones 4 and beyond that Warlocks bring to the group because they can keep making them in the middle of the dungeon. So a little bit less utility points here than people often argue on my tier list videos as to why Warlocks should be higher up on the tier list. One really big thing that Warlocks do have is actually Demonic Gateway. There are quite a few dungeons where Demonic Gateway facilitates skips. Freehold, you can use it to get to and from the bridges without pulling the annoying mobs that are in the way. You can use it in Siege of Borealis to do some cool things. So there are nice spots to Gateway all around in Mythic Plus. And this is, I think, an underrated part of the Warlock kit. One of the bigger pieces of utility that they do bring. Sort of a pseudo Shroud in some spots, which is obviously very powerful. Shroud is extremely strong. Shadow Fury is an AoE stun that Demonology Warlocks can cast. They can talent into a reduction on this cooldown to make it available more often, or they can talent into Mortal Coil as a Horrify and a heal on themselves that can be used as a single target stop, and that is also a nice little piece of interacting with a pack that is something that the Warlock kit is otherwise lacking. Or they can just talent into Demonic Circle. Demonic Circle isn't something that sees too much play in Mythic Plus. It's more of a raid piece, because just setting it up before every time you'd want to use it is a little bit awkward. But there are some dungeons where there might be some abilities that you can dodge with Demonic Circle. Like Toldegor First Boss, for instance, you can use Demonic Circle to dodge the upheaval if you have good timing. So talenting into that for those sorts of specific circumstances is an option as well, absolutely. Demonology Warlocks have a very strong defensive cooldown and Unending Resolve, a nice big damage reduction, but it's on a very long cooldown, so that is the drawback with that one. And they can talent into Dark Pact. Dark Pact is not a guaranteed thing for them to talent into. It's against Burning Rush, which is a movement speed option, or Demon Skin. I forget if it's Demonic Skin or Demon Skin. I'm pretty sure it's Demon Skin, which is a passive increase in their healing on themselves. But if they choose to talent into Dark Pact, this is a massive absorb shield that they can put on themselves. Basically, they'll sacrifice 20% of their current health and gain an absorb shield for 250% of that sacrificed amount. So if they're at half health, all of a sudden they're now at 40% health, but they have a shield on themselves for more than a full health bar, more than a full health bar's worth of damage. So that can be very, very, very big. Extremely useful way to survive otherwise massive amounts of damage. You get hit by a Severing Axe, or you're taking a double on Overseer Korgus, a double hit of Explosive Burst. Dark Pact, extremely useful in that spot. Does require talenting out of the movement option and Burning Rush, and the passive healing of Demon Skin, though. Warlocks have some abilities associated with their pet. They can command their demons to do things. The main one will be Stun, a single target stun when they have their Felguard out, because the Felguard is the pet that they're going to normally have out for damage anyways. But if they choose to bring out an Imp or a Fel Hunter, they can kick or dispel. The dispel doesn't come up too often, although there are some spots where having an extra dispel in the group is actually very useful. Rixa Flux Flame, if you've checked out my Rixa Flux Flame video that I think came out yesterday, as of the time when this one's going to come out, then that'll be a spot where you can get some good value out of that. But otherwise, it's mostly the kick here. So if you're in a spot where you need to have a kick, something like Tide Sage Council in Shrine of the Storm, then you need to pull out your Fel Hunter, give up a little bit of damage, and kick there using the Fel Hunter. It's on a 24-second cooldown, but it does come with a 6-second lockout. So that's as good as the Mage lockout, a very long lockout from the enemy casting in that school. And that can sometimes bridge the gap between the 24-second cooldown and the 15-second cooldown that most melee get. Usually it's still a little worse than a melee kick, and obviously the fact that you have to sacrifice damage to pull it out is a big drawback too. Warlocks can banish some enemies, not very many in BFA. Notable ones are like Priestess Alunza, the ads that she spawns can be banished, and the mask thing in Underrot, the big befouled spirit, that can be banished too. So this is something that's particularly useful if you want the mob to be, like you want to handle it later, you want to just stall, like on Alunza, you just banish something and you'll eventually win the fight and never have to have dealt with the thing. And if something is banishable that will then get bolstered onto, for instance, it will not get bolstered onto while it's banished. It'll be immune to that bolster, so that can be really useful. Not too much of a thing, though, in BFA dungeons. Much more useful back in Legion when there were more demons around. And finally, Warlocks can summon. This is not something that is really part of a strategy in many dungeons, although there are some spots where I could see this being useful. If Warlocks were part of, meta comps, I could see strategies being built around people hearthing out, swapping talents and getting summoned back. That sort of thing is something that is not out of the realm of possibility. We sort of do that in a couple dungeons where we'll hearth out and then run back in and get back to the graveyard where you're at. But having a Warlock in your group will let you do this in more places throughout the dungeon. So that's the kind of thing that, a kind of piece of utility that I'd say has yet to be fully explored in the Warlock kit, but is powerful. I think you do have to summon the person twice, though. When you first summon somebody, they'll show up at the graveyard in the dungeon, and then you have to summon them again to actually get them into where your group is. So it does take a little bit of time. It's annoying to execute this. It is useful, though, if your group contains somebody like Tettles who randomly hearts out by clicking Blingtrons. Okay, let's talk about the builds of Demonology Warlock. The most popular major essence is Vision of Perfection. This will give you more Demonic Tyrants all the time. And also, because you got it as a major, you get it as a minor too, so your Demonic Tyrant cooldown gets reduced, and you can have it up basically every pull, which is very nice. The minors will usually see Memory of Lucid Dreams, a pretty good one that was almost always picked. And then outside of that, stuff like Focusing Iris for some haste, as long as you're attacking one target. That's usually a pretty good option there. Or Conflict and Strife for just some flat versatility, also in a similar sort of space. Usually it's Vision Major, Lucid Minor, and then one of these two as that third minor slot, or second minor slot. The trait that Demonology Warlocks are most interested in stacking is Explosive Potential. This buffs their implosion or gives them a bunch of haste when they cast it, and that is a nice thing to do, and it works well in any sized amount of targets that they're fighting pretty much, which is really great in a Mythic Plus setting. Outside of that, they like picking up one-ofs, a bunch of different one-ofs of traits. These aren't all mandatory, but these are the three traits that they'll usually try and get one copy of. Baleful Invocation, Demonic Meteor in Mythic Plus, less important than single target, but helpful in Mythic Plus because they cast a lot of Hands of Gul'dan there. And Supreme Commander, which does have some nice synergy with Vision of Perfection. These are the three one-ofs that you'll usually see in Demonology Warlock builds in Mythic Plus. It's okay if the Demonology Warlock doesn't have access to all these traits, some kind of stat proc or whatever is fine here. They can go down to less explosive potential, but theoretically, this is the setup that works best. Demonology Warlock trinkets tend to be just the raid caster trinkets. The most common setup is Azhar's Font of Power and Leviathan's Lure, just because they're good, solid amounts of, over-budgeted trinkets. However, if you're willing to play with the Aquapotent Nautilus trinket, that can also do substantial AoE damage throughout a Mythic Plus run. This one requires you to target something, and then it sends a wave at them, and it bounces the wave back at you. Demonology, so to get full value from this trinket, you actually want to make sure that the wave passes through the mobs you're hitting, and then hits something far away from them, and then passes through them again on the way back to you, so that you can get extra uptime on the dot, because it will refresh on its way back, and you'll get way more duration on it. If you can maximize this trinket that way, it does huge amounts of damage. Demonology Warlocks can sometimes even target their own pet. They can, have the pack be between them and their pet, and then they can send it at a pet, and then have it come back at them. But that's tricky to facilitate. Most of the time, people who are choosing to use Aquapotent Nautilus will stock up on racing flags. It's like a Mist of Pandaria rep, the Order of the Jade Serpent. You can get these racing flags, and you can just place them down on the ground far away from the pack, and then send your Aquapotent Nautilus at that, and have it come back at you through the pack, and apply that double stack of the dot. If you're willing to min-max this thing, it'll do a lot of damage. Otherwise, just using regular trinkets is totally fine too. Okay, let's talk about things that work well with and poorly with Demonology Warlocks. As I said, the biggest thing that jumps out to me as a Demonology thing, obviously besides doing a lot of magic damage and being happy with the Demon Hunter in the group, for instance, is the need for some extra kicks in the group, or the benefit that you'll get from extra kicks in the group. So stuff like Protection Paladins or Restoration Shaman that bring extra kicks to the group can help your Demonology Warlock not need to have their Fell Hunter pet out. You can do that second boss in Shrine of the Storm with their Fell Guard out if you have one of these classes in the group, probably. And it can just mean that you'll get extra incidental kicks throughout the dungeon that are something that Demonology Warlocks generally don't contribute. Usually if Demonology Warlocks are interrupting a cast, it's because they're like hard casting a Shadow Fury. They can't just randomly throw out kicks off the GCD like everybody else can. And that is, definitely a drawback to the spec. So bolstering that with some extra kicks from specs like Prot and Resto Shaman are good things to do. The big tension on the flip side is other range specs in the group. Other range specs in the groups have long duration kicks, or sort of long cooldown kicks, I should say. And that is, you really don't have room for any more bad kick in the group if you have a Demonology Warlock. So double ranged comps with Demonology Warlock are pretty big no-no in high keys. And it's a spooky place to be already, even with just the one Demonology Warlock. Thanks everybody for watching this spec spotlight on the Demonology Warlock. Hope you enjoyed this little look into a less popular spec, although the most popular Warlock spec. I could see the spec being brought to high keys next season, as long as its damage scales up. It'll probably need to be doing more damage than the other specs, because it does have a little bit less overall utility. But if it is doing that, I could see it being brought to keys, so I think it's good to know how it works. If you're interested in learning more about this spec and watching some very high-level gameplay of it, I'd recommend Shelly Teven. There's a 0% chance I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but Shelly, S-J-E-L-E. I'll put links in the description. He's got both a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream where he does very high-level content on Warlock, often as Demonology. So you can watch those to see how he plays it and runs, ask him questions about the spec and everything. And if Warlock is good, he's going to be the first person owning with it ever, and he already is owning with it on the key ladder. So very good place to go to learn more about this spec. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Twitch stream as well as Shelly's. My Twitch stream is twitch.tv/Dratnos, although you're unlikely to see any Demonology Warlock action there unless they make Essence's account wide. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.